Welcome to our attendees. We're so glad you're here. I'm Joy Ritchie. I'm the Director of Sponsored Programs. It's been my pleasure to work with Kim and Amber to put together this webinar on the intersection of FERPA and the IRB. My role today is really just to serve as host and manage the tech. So I'll be monitoring the Q&A and the chat function. So please submit questions as we're going, and I will share those with Amber and Kim as they're presenting. Because we're using the webinar function, we aren't able to see you, and you won't be able to speak unless I give you a special permission. So if you want to ask a question out loud, please raise your hand. I'm happy to do that. And so here, away we go. I'll hand this off to our presenters.
Hello, I'm Amber Hall. I'm the Director of Institutional Research here at the University of Central Arkansas, and to do this presentation with me is Kimberly Ashley Pauley, the Research Compliance Officer. This presentation is intended for faculty and staff who are doing research that involves student data. We're going to examine the key provisions of FERPA, the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, and outline the university's process to seek approval for accessing UCA student data for research purposes. And so Joy has a poll for you.
Gonna give it a few more seconds so everybody has a chance. Okay, here we go. I will share the results. In your time at UCA, have you accessed the services of the IRB, the Office of Institutional Research, both or neither? It looks like the majority have definitely worked with both of your offices. Oh. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing now and you're free to go, Amber.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for answering our poll. It gives us a little bit more context of who's in our audience. So the next slide, we have a basic agenda for today's presentation. First, we're going to go over some definitions of IRB, FERPA, and what a designated school official is. We're also going to discuss the IRB process and the designated school official process. So for the definitions, we're going to go over firstly, IRB, FERPA, what is an education record, directory information, and legitimate educational interest.
So the IRB definition is, this is going over what an IRB board is, and it is a university committee, and we serve a very important role in the protections of the rights and welfare of human research subjects. So our main purpose as that IRB board committee is to review research and to assure both in advance and periodically we review applications that have been approved, that the appropriate steps are taken to protect those rights and welfare of all human subjects that are participating in any type of research.
And now we're going to go over FERPA. I know many of you have heard of FERPA since you've started here at the university, but to just kind of give you the main essence of FERPA, it is a federal law designed to protect the privacy of education records. It provides guidelines for appropriately using and releasing student education records. And it is intended that the student's right be broadly defined and applied. Therefore, consider the student as the owner of the information in his or her education record, and the institution, meaning the University of Central Arkansas, as the custodian of that record. So what exactly is an education record? If FERPA is supposed to protect a student's education record, it's any record that contains personally identifiable information. Personally identifiable information could actually be aggregate data. Here within the United States, every state has what we call a FERPA count. So you have to abide by a FERPA count before you can release aggregate information. So in the state of Arkansas, our FERPA count is 10. So all of our counts need to be 11, or above if we're trying to provide aggregate information, because it could be personally identifiable. You could figure out who a person is even by that aggregate information. Other states have different counts. It just depends on the state you're in. So what is directory information? Directory information is under FERPA. But any of this information that is listed as directory information, is student name, class level, that is information that we wouldn't have to necessarily abide by the FERPA count rule. But a student can opt out of directory information being released. But if the information that we're releasing is the things that are on this list, degrees earned, things of that nature, then we wouldn't have to abide by that FERPA count rule because it is directory information. Oops, sorry. It went a little fast on me. Okay, so part of FERPA is if you have what is considered a legitimate educational interest, you can get access to information that can be aggregate or in detail, and have access to everything without it being FERPA compliant, meaning it has to abide by those aggregate counts to be released out into the public. But if you are an employee of the university and you have what is considered a legitimate educational interest, you can get access to individual records or aggregate information that's smaller than those counts. What a legitimate educational interest means is it's part of your job or your daily duties, or things like it's a personnel file prep. So like for your tenure and promotion application or mid-tenure application or your FAFSA, that is part of legitimate educational interest. So here are some important parts that, or important points pertaining to legitimate educational interests. Curiosity is not a legitimate educational interest. And being an employee of the university does not give you access to everything at the university. Just because you're an employee doesn't mean you have access to everything. You have access as an employee to specific records for your job. So but you don't have access to all records. So as an advisor, you would have access to only your specific students, but not every student here at the university. And then the last thing is kind of a big thing, the record or a grade for a student for the course, it belongs to the institution. Remember back at the beginning, the institution is the custodian of that data. So that record or grade of a student belongs to the institution and student. And Joy has another poll for you.
Oh, hang on. Sorry, I'm having to go process through the first poll to get there. Oh, well, I don't know if I can do our poll. I'm so sorry. I'm having trouble. I don't seem to be able to move on to poll 2 right now. And so I don't want to hold you up. I'm sorry. I think you should probably keep going. I'm not sure what the problem I'm having is.
Okay. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to go over is the next set of key concepts. The definition of what is a designated school official, the designated school official process, and the decision of do I need an IRB or not. So what is a designated school official? A designated school official is a university employee who is doing research that will affect the institution. So you might want to become a designated school official to get access to do research that's not part of your job or daily duties. An example is committee work, and that is all internal. If you have to go through an application process to become a designated school official, you have to tell us how the research that you're doing is going to benefit the institution. And there's kind of two parts that we'll go through later on a designated school official. There's one that's a very formalized process that goes with an IRB, and then there's another process where you will just contact my office to be a designated school official, but we'll go over that in just a little bit. So here's this kind of starting of the process flow. So the first question you would want to ask yourself is, do you intend to share the data in any form with an external audience at any point? If the answer is no, you would contact me for a process where I would contact the appropriate people to get you as a designated school official. But if you do want to go to an external audience at any point in time, and we normally recommend if you think you might, just go through this process. So first you would want to confirm with my office after you do determine you want to go to an external office that the student data is available. Because and here's the next one. So not every data is available. So that's why you would need to contact my office, because it says right there, you might reconsider your data needs. There's some data that is housed within what we call our ERP, which is Banner here on our campus, which sits there, but it isn't available to us because it's protected under a different law, because it's called the Higher Education Act is one of the things, such as FAFSA data that is protected under the Higher Education Act. So if you would contact me and we would confirm that the data is not available, then you might want to reconsider your data needs or see what else you might could do. If your data is available, then the next stop would be going to the IRB for approval.
So the IRB process, the way we do it here at UCA is, first of all, after you've contacted Amber to see if your data is available, that's the first step, because you're going to need that information to be able to fill out your application. So located here on number 1, you would go to the research compliance website, go to the forms, and you would choose a application. Normally, most of these that I've seen are normally exempt or expedited. I would encourage you to call my office, talk to me, or even email me, and we can discuss which form you would need to fill out. And the information that you get from Amber, you're going to use to fill out that form. You're going to explain in that IRB process or on that application, you're going to explain what data that you're going to be using, the purpose, and the explanation of how it will be used, and you're going to list that all in the application. Once you fill out the application, you will obtain signatures of everyone that is involved with that research. So that includes the PI, and anybody else that will be looking at that data will need to sign the application along with the chair of your department. I know I have some chairs that are also doing research. If they are doing research, then the next signature, they can't sign the application as the chair, they would have to get their dean's signature. After you get that application done, you'll email it to researchcompliance@uca.edu. And then the process from there is it then will be reviewed by me. It will then go to the chair of the IRB for approval. Once she gives approval or any kind of revisions that might need to be done on that application, I will then provide you with a approval memo, which will then be sent to, of course, to the PI and to Amber Hall in IR, just so that way she's aware that you have gone through that process and it has been approved.
Okay, so once you've gotten your IRB approval, does that mean that you have access to student data? There's kind of two paths you can go in with your IRB. One is if you ask the student's consent, and if the student gives you their consent and we have the documentation on all of the students, then we give you their data that they consented to. If they did not give their consent, then you need to become what is called a designated school official. So this is the process as I just previously mentioned. So if you do have their consent, you would contact my office. But if you do not have their consent, you would become a designated school official. Right down there is the website for the designated school official application. And here is the website for the designated school application or school official application. The first PDF link down there at the bottom is the application. And there's a 3-step process for that application. So this is obviously after you get your IRB approved. The first part in that PDF is the application. The second part, there is an OIR review process where we go over variable definitions and a little bit more in detail about FERPA. Then the number 3 is after number 1 and 2 are done, then it is sent to the provost for her review. And if there's any questions normally throughout this process, because FERPA can be very confusing, and I've gotten in multiple conversations with our legal counsel and our registrar about FERPA, just feel free to contact me via email or my phone number to just contact me about what path we might need to go through, or if you do have access to something, or if you're allowed to have it or not. And I communicate with the registrar and our legal counsel regularly. So I will help facilitate any of those conversations. Joy, do you think you can get our last poll?
No, I'm so sorry. We worked really hard on these poll questions too, but I don't seem to be able to get past relaunching poll 1, and I don't think we should do that one again. So I'm
okay.
sorry. Technical difficulty.
Okay, so, and this is just our contact information, mine and Kim's. So if you have any questions or want to talk any more about the process, feel free to reach out to us at our email or our phone numbers. And do we have any questions?
Yeah, you're welcome to enter questions in the Q&A or the chat, or if you raise your hand, I can hit allow you to talk if you would like to ask, to articulate your question out loud. Dr. Glenn has asked, will this be posted where we can review it? It will. We will post it. It's being recorded, and it'll be on the sponsored programs web page, and I suspect Amber also will have a home for it as well. But we will email it out to everyone who's attended. Oh, Leslie Graybill, I'm going to allow you to talk now. Thank you for raising your hand. There you go. Leslie, you should be able to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hey, thank y'all so much. So I had a question about becoming a designated school official. Is that something you should do only for a specific project after completing the IRB for that project? Or is that something that you do and then you have that status for just any project you might be working on?
It is only for a specific project. That's a good question. So you only have it for a specific project, and there's also things within your IRB application and also within the designated school application about how long you maintain the data.
Okay, so that would be done each time you're doing a project where you might need to do that.
Yes, that is correct.
And Leslie, it's kind of like, you get an IRB for each project.
Mm-hmm.
So you wouldn't have an IRB and it would cover all of your projects that you do at the university. So it's kind of similar to that. It's research specific.
Got it. Thank you all so much.
Uh-huh.
Hey, we have a question from Dr. Barlow. Can you provide a concrete example of a research study that a faculty might conduct that would need to go through this process?
I've done 2 that's on either end of the bottom. So we have a committee, it's G2C, Gateways to Completion. That's what it stands for, sorry. Yes. Gateways to Completion. There are multiple groups on there for each of the courses. One course went through the whole process with me where they wanted to do research on certain things of retention and their course and DFWIs and things of that nature. And they were hoping to present to the national conference for G2C. And so they went the route of where they became a designated school official because they did not ask a student's consent. Unluckily, COVID happened, so they did not keep going on with their research to try to present at that national conference. But they did go through the whole process where they, like I said, they asked for, and they had probably a list of maybe 15 to 20 variables that I can't remember off the top of my head. But I do remember like DFWI rates, if the student was retained or not. Theirs included some demographic information. And so I don't know the result of that research and how far they got moved forward with it because of COVID. Like I said, they were hoping to present at G2C, but that one didn't happen. Another group that I've worked with on the G2C committee as well, they went the other route and they actually asked for a student's consent. So they worked with Kim, got an IRB approval. They asked for their students' consent, but prior to their students' consent, they did still reach out to me to ask some clarification to make sure they could get the data that they needed. So they went through the process with Kim. They then got the student's consent, gave me the documentation for all the data that the student consented to and such, and then we provided them back a file on their research. But I don't think they had necessarily intentions in the beginning for sure for that one to necessarily present at a national conference, but they wanted to make sure they were covered in case they wanted to present at a national conference.
And as we say, always err on the side of caution.
Yeah.
If there's a possibility that you're going to present, or it's going to be presented in a paper of some sort in a peer-reviewed journal, you need to get IRB approval before doing that.
And both of those were part of G2C, so they were always going to help with the pedagogy of their courses. So, but the first one knew they wanted to do a national conference, and the second one thought we might, but we're not sure. So we're just going to err on the side of caution.
Right.
Dr. Barlow asks, if I'm a faculty member interested in conducting research in my own class and I wanted to use my students' grades as a measure of impact, do I have to contact the Office of Institutional Research? And this is it. That's in the chat if you all want to look at it.
I see that. I don't know that you would have. Okay, this is what we do on the IRB side. You would have to have an IRB to do that, because again, those grades do not belong to the professor. Even though they might have given those grades to those students, they cannot use those grades without prior consent from that student. So for sure, they would have to get an IRB if they knew ahead of time, they could get consent and then they could use those grades. But I have had faculty members that said that they wanted to use grades from 3 years ago for students and use it to improve the quality of their class, and they want to use the grades 3 years ago and compare them to the grades now. You could do the grades moving forward and get consent, but those students have already moved on and you don't have consent, so you cannot use those grades on the IRB side. Amber, that's an IRB question, I believe, but
I think it would depend on the situation on how you were going to use those student grades, because I've seen some where a faculty member in their FASPR will talk about how they might have changed their pedagogy and such, and it's a specific section where they're documenting how they're trying to improve themselves, and that's part of a personnel file. That's not something that's going out to anybody. But if you're possibly going to use that data to present to your whole department, then it's a different case, because just because you teach that course doesn't mean that another instructor in your department has the right to know the grades of your students in your courses. So I think it goes back to that question at the beginning, who's going to be your audience? So if it's something internal, like I said, for a FASPR or something you're doing for a TMP document, because those documents would go to your department chair. If you're just documenting some changes that you might have done and how you're trying to improve yourself and using that as an example, that's one thing versus trying to share it with another faculty member.
So if Dean Barlow means capital R research in her field that she's going to do something with, I mean, she does need to go to your office, correct, Amber? I mean, the Office of Institutional Research always, if you're, should check it, they should check in, a faculty member should check in with you.
Yes.
If this is other than doing sort of personnel stuff or committee work.
Yes.
I mean, the audience is kind of the deciding factor here. And Dean Barlow, you're welcome to unmute yourself if you have follow-up. Yeah. Nope. I guess, oh, I'm good, thanks, she said. Okay. Any other questions? I don't see. Okay, here's one, Dr. Yarberry. Does it matter if it is aggregate data when using past years of data, meaning relative number of students scoring ABC and so forth?
It goes back to that point I mentioned earlier. There's a FERPA count for each state. So Arkansas has a FERPA count of 10. And so we have to release aggregate information at 11 or above. So, and my office has gone through a whole lot of training in FERPA on how we can release information, because even if you say your class count is 12, but there's 5 A's, this many B's, you're getting those counts less. So there's a document that you actually have to read as part of being a designated school official on a little bit of the, and it's just a little bit of the training on how we've gotten to release information to get by FERPA or understand FERPA on how you can release or how you can't release information. But aggregate information does not mean that it's FERPA compliant. There's a lot of things you have to understand about, is your aggregate information above the FERPA counts, and can you also take a total and then subtract a number and then get the opposite. So if I can know there are this many students in a course and the DFWI count is this one, and then the opposite number is not above our FERPA count, then you can't release that information. You have to do a lot of adding and subtracting. It's very difficult and technical and very hard to understand. My office has gone through quite a bit of training. We sit there and stare at our documents a lot of times, trying to make sure everything's FERPA compliant.
Okay, I'm going to ask you all a super beginner's question, just in case anybody is wondering this. And I've heard y'all do this a few times and I'm still getting this straightened out. So if I'm a faculty member and I want student data for anything that's other than directory information, which is sort of freely available, right? Unless someone's opted out of it, then do I need to become a designated school official?
Yes.
Yes. And then the next question is am I sharing it with an outside audience, or am I just doing my job with it? And if I'm just doing internal job stuff, Amber, I can just go to you and you can do, it's fairly quick and simple as long as the data is available. If it's going to be shared externally at all, then I need to involve the IRB and go through this process that you've outlined. Okay.
Yes.
Any other questions from our attendees? You're welcome to chat or Q&A or raise your hand. No, I don't. It doesn't look like, I think you must have answered all the questions. Great. Well, Amber and Kim, thank you. And thank you everyone who attended. As I mentioned, we've recorded this webinar and we'll get it up in the next 24 hours or so on the sponsored programs website. I'm sure Amber will get it up as well. And you'll get an email from me with this recording and probably with a short survey to see how we did. And we really appreciate you all attending. And I don't know, stay well, everybody. Thank you so much. Happy Monday.
Bye-bye.
Good job, Amber and Kim.
Thanks.